In the Arizona Territory of 1885, Clara Mae Bennett drives her buckboard through endless desert, her pregnant belly heavy with both child and sorrow. The sun beats mercilessly as she follows a trail that leads nowhere, carrying nothing but supplies, and the weight of starting over as a widow. When she spots something dark against the sand dunes, she nearly passes by. But conscience won't let her. Half buried and barely breathing lies a man, coat torn, lips cracked, eyes closed against the brutal sun. His gun belt is gone, his horse nowhere to be seen. Clara knows she should keep driving. A pregnant woman alone has no business rescuing strangers in the middle of nowhere. Yet something about his weathered hands and the gentleness in his unconscious face stirs her heart. She can't leave him to die. What Clara doesn't know is that saving this broken cowboy will change everything she thought she knew about love, loss and second chances. But when a mysterious bounty hunter starts asking questions about a missing gunslinger, will her act of mercy become her greatest mistake? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The way station sits like a weathered prayer against the vast Arizona sky. Adobe walls the color of dried blood, wooden posts bleached white by decades of sun. Clara Mae Bennett moves through the morning routine with practiced precision, her movements careful around her swollen belly. 8 months now, and the child within her kicks with increasing urgency, as if sensing the approach of a world that has already taken so much. She fills the water barrel from the well her late husband Samuel dug 3 summers past, before the fever took him and left her with nothing but this remote outpost and the growing life inside her. The rope feels rough against her palms, calloused now from work that was once Samuel's domain. Each pull brings up precious water, and she whispers a prayer of gratitude for the spring that never runs dry, even in the worst drought years. The morning air carries the scent of sage and creosote, familiar as her own breathing. This land has been her world for 4 years now, ever since Samuel brought her here as a young bride, full of dreams about building something lasting in the wilderness. The way station serves travelers on the old mining road, though fewer come through each year as the silver plays out and folks move on to easier fortunes. Clara's hands rest on her belly as she feels the baby shift and settle. She speaks to the child often, her voice soft in the desert silence. "Your papa would have loved you something fierce," she murmurs, watching the sun climb higher. "He had such plans, little one. A proper town growing up around us, maybe a church, certainly a school." She pauses, her throat tight with memory. But plans don't always hold, do they? The way station consists of 3 main buildings connected by covered walkways that provide blessed shade in the punishing heat. The main house where Clara lives contains the kitchen, sitting room and bedroom she once shared with Samuel. The second building houses 4 small rooms for travelers, though it's been weeks since anyone passed through. The third serves as a stable and storage for supplies that come by freight wagon twice a year, if she's fortunate. Clara moves to the corral, where her 2 horses, Patience and Grace, wait for their morning feed. Samuel named them, saying any creatures that survived out here needed virtues more than fancy appellations. She runs her hand along Patience's neck, feeling the mare's solid warmth, grateful for the companionship these animals provide in her solitude. The wedding ring on her finger catches the light as she works. Samuel's ring, passed down from his father, too large for her slender finger, but worn with such constancy that removing it would feel like losing a piece of her soul. She'd wrapped it with thin leather to keep it secure, and now it bears the patina of honest work. Cooking, cleaning, tending animals, maintaining the buildings that shelter her from the wilderness. Samuel had been a gentleman, patient with her fears about leaving civilization for this harsh place. He'd courted her properly in Tucson, where her father served as a territorial judge. Their courtship unfolded over church socials and chaperoned walks, conversations about literature and shared dreams of building something meaningful together. He'd promised her a library, room for a proper garden, neighbors who would become friends. The fever that took him came swift and merciless. One day he was repairing the roof, humming under his breath as he worked, and within a week he lay cold beneath the single cottonwood tree behind the house. Clara had to dig his grave herself, the ground hard and unforgiving, her hands bleeding by the time she finished. She'd read from his Bible, her voice cracking over familiar verses about resurrection and eternal rest, while the desert wind carried her words away into emptiness. That was 8 months ago. Just as she discovered she carried his child, the timing felt like either a blessing or a curse, depending on her mood. Some days the pregnancy seemed like Samuel's final gift, a piece of him that would live on. Other days it felt like an anchor, tying her to this place when every instinct screamed at her to flee back to civilization and safety. But Clara Mae Bennett was not a woman who fled. Her father had raised her to face difficulties with courage and common sense. She'd learned to shoot Samuel's rifle, to read weather patterns, to preserve food and ration supplies through the long winter months when the freight wagons couldn't make it through. She'd become someone she wouldn't have recognized 4 years ago, self-reliant, practical, strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength. The baby moves again, and Clara places both hands on her belly, feeling the solid reality of new life. "We'll manage," she tells the child. "Your mama's learned a few things about surviving." She thinks of the money hidden in a coffee tin beneath the floorboards, enough to last 2 years if she's careful, longer if travelers start. Using the road again, the heat builds as morning progresses toward noon. Clara retreats to the shaded walkway between buildings, settling into the rocking chair Samuel made for her during their first winter here. From this vantage point, she can see the road stretching in both directions, east toward the territorial capital, west toward California, and the coast. Some days she watches that road for hours, hoping to spot dust clouds that might signal approaching travelers. Mostly, she sees heat mirages and the occasional antelope. She picks up her sewing, working on tiny garments for the baby. The stitches are even and precise, each one a small act of faith in the future. Clara learned needlework from her mother back in St. Louis, before the family moved west when her father accepted his judicial appointment. Those skills, dismissed as mere feminine accomplishments in her former life, now serve practical purposes in keeping clothes mended and creating what she needs from available materials. The afternoon brings no visitors, as most afternoons do. Clara tends her small vegetable garden, coaxing life from soil that seems determined to remain barren. Tomatoes, squash, and beans struggle against the heat, but her careful watering and tending usually produces enough to supplement the preserved foods that sustain her through each season. As evening approaches, she prepares a simple meal for herself, though her appetite has been poor lately. The baby takes up more space now, pressing against her stomach and ribs, making it difficult to eat much at one sitting. She finds herself eating small amounts throughout the day, constantly sipping water, resting more frequently as her body prepares for the labor that cannot be far away. The thought of giving birth alone terrifies her, though she tries not to dwell on it. She's read every book Samuel owned about medicine and midwifery, studied the basic principles until she could recite them. She's prepared supplies, made lists of what she'll need, practiced breathing exercises recommended in the texts. But knowledge feels inadequate when faced with the reality of bringing a child into the world without assistance. As darkness falls, Clara lights the oil lamps that push back the desert night. She settles into her evening routine, reading from Samuel's books, writing in the journal she's kept since his death, speaking to the baby about their plans for tomorrow. The silence of the desert is profound, broken only by the distant call of coyotes and the settling sounds of the buildings around her. Before bed, she steps outside to look at the stars, brilliant in the clear desert air. Samuel used to say the stars out here looked close enough to pluck from the sky, and Clara often feels as though she could reach up and gather them like fallen coins. The vastness above mirrors the vastness around her, and in that immensity she finds both comfort and a keen awareness of her own smallness. She locks the doors, checks the rifle beside her bed, and lies down to wait for sleep. The baby quiets. As she settles and Clara places her hand on her belly one more time. "Sweet dreams, little one," she whispers. "Tomorrow we'll see what the desert brings us." What the desert would bring her was already making its way across the sand, carried by wind and fate toward her door. But tonight, Clara Mae Bennett sleeps peacefully, unaware that her careful, solitary life is about to change forever, in ways that will test every ounce of strength and courage she's built during her months of solitude. The sun hangs merciless in the afternoon sky when Clara first spots the dark shape against the dunes. She's been watching the eastern road through the kitchen window while kneading bread dough, her movements slow and deliberate in the heat. At first she thinks it might be a dead animal, perhaps a horse that wandered off to die, but something about the form nags at her attention. She wipes flour from her hands and steps onto the front porch, shading her eyes against the glare. The shape doesn't move, and buzzards circle overhead in lazy spirals that make her stomach clench with dread. Clara knows she should stay put. A pregnant woman has no business investigating mysterious objects in the desert, but conscience won't let her ignore what might be a person in need. The buckboard creaks under her weight as she climbs onto the driver's seat. Patience snorts and tosses her head, unhappy about venturing out in the worst heat of the day. "I know, girl," Clara murmurs, taking up the reins, "but we can't just leave someone to die if there's help to be given." The ride across the sand takes longer than expected. What looked like a short distance from the way station stretches into nearly a mile of rough terrain. The wheels of the buckboard sink into loose sand, forcing Patience to work harder than Clara. Likes. Sweat beads on her forehead and runs down her back, soaking through her dress, despite the shade provided by her wide-brimmed hat. As she draws closer, Clara's breath catches in her throat. It is indeed a man, half buried in sand, that the wind has blown across his still form. His coat is torn and faded, once good quality, but now bearing the marks of hard use. No horse in sight, no supplies, no indication of how he came to be here. The buzzards scatter reluctantly as she approaches, their shadows dark against the pale sand. Clara sets the brake and climbs down carefully, her pregnancy making her movements awkward. She approaches the figure with caution, one hand resting on the small pistol Samuel taught her to carry. The man lies face down, his dark hair matted with sand and dried blood. His breathing is so shallow she has to watch his back carefully to detect any movement at all. "Sir?" she calls softly, not wanting to startle him if he's conscious. No response. She kneels beside him with difficulty, her belly making it hard to maneuver. Up close, she can see he's younger than she first thought, maybe 35 at most. His hands are calloused but clean, suggesting he's not a drifter or outlaw. The absence of a gun belt puzzles her. No man travels the desert unarmed unless circumstances have stripped him of protection. Clara struggles to turn him over, his dead weight almost too much for her in her condition. When she finally manages to roll him onto his back, she gets her first clear look at his face. Strong jaw stubbled with several days' growth, high cheekbones burned by sun and wind, lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. But it's his expression that moves her, even unconscious. His features hold a gentleness that seems at odds with his rough appearance. His torn coat reveals a shirt that was once white, now stained with blood and dust. Clara examines him quickly for obvious injuries, finding a gash along his left temple and what appears to be an old bullet wound in his shoulder, partially healed but still angry-looking. His breathing rattles slightly, and she knows he won't last long without water and shelter. The decision comes without hesitation, despite every practical voice in her head, screaming warnings. Clara Mae Bennett cannot leave a man to die in the desert, regardless of the risk to herself. She's learned many things during her months of solitude, but callousness isn't one of them. Getting him into the buckboard proves nearly impossible. Even with the adrenaline that comes from urgency, his unconscious weight exceeds her strength. Clara has to back the wagon as close as possible, then drag him inch by painful inch across the sand. By the time she manages to roll him over the tailgate, she's exhausted and dizzy from exertion in the heat. The ride back to the way station passes in a blur of worry and determination. Clara keeps glancing over her shoulder at her passenger, checking for signs of consciousness, or worse, indications that she's too late to help. His breathing remains shallow but steady, and she takes that as encouragement. At the way station, she faces the challenge of getting him inside. Clara backs the wagon as close to the guest quarters as possible, then manages to drag him from the buckboard onto a blanket she spreads on the ground. From there, she pulls him across the threshold and onto one of the narrow beds, her back aching, and her pregnancy making every movement a struggle. The man's coat is ruined beyond salvage, and Clara cuts it away with kitchen shears to better examine his injuries. Beneath the torn fabric, she finds more evidence of a hard life. Old scars crisscross his torso, and his hands bear the calluses of someone familiar with rope and reins. But there's something refined about his features, an intelligence in his face that suggests education and breeding despite his current circumstances. Clara fetches water and clean cloths, beginning the careful work of cleaning his wounds. The head injury looks worse than it is. Scalp wounds always bleed heavily, but the bullet wound in his shoulder shows signs of infection. She draws on knowledge gleaned from Samuel's medical books, cleaning the wound with whiskey and applying a poultice made from herbs she grows in her garden. As she works, the man stirs slightly, his breathing becoming less labored. Clara talks to him softly, the way she might speak to an injured animal, hoping her voice might provide some comfort even if he can't understand her words. "You're safe now," she murmurs, bathing his face with cool water. "Whatever brought you, here you're safe." His eyes flutter open briefly, startling blue in his sun-darkened face, but consciousness proves too much effort. Clara watches him slip back into the depths of exhaustion and injury, noting that his breathing seems easier now that he's out of the brutal sun. She prepares a thin broth from the bones she's been saving, something nutritious but easy to digest. When he wakes enough to take food, the baby moves restlessly within her, as if picking up on her tension and uncertainty. Clara places a protective hand on her belly, suddenly aware of how her simple act of mercy has complicated her carefully ordered life. Night falls as she maintains her vigil beside the stranger's bed. Clara dozes fitfully in the room's single chair, waking periodically to check his breathing and drip water between his cracked lips. Questions multiply in her mind like desert stars. Who is he? How did he come to be alone and injured in the middle of nowhere? And most importantly, what will she do if he doesn't recover? But beneath her practical concerns runs a current of something else, something she barely admits to herself. Having another human presence in the way station, even an unconscious one, eases a loneliness she's been carrying for so long she'd almost forgotten its weight. The sound of his breathing, the simple reality of another living soul sharing her space, brings a comfort she hadn't expected. As dawn approaches, Clara finally allows herself to return to her own bed for a few hours of real sleep. Before leaving, she checks on him one more time, noting that his color seems better and his breathing more natural. Whatever brought him to her door, whatever secrets he carries, she's committed now to seeing him through to recovery. The torn. Her coat lies in a heap beside the bed, and Clara picks it up to examine it more closely. The fabric was once fine wool, well-tailored and expensive. In the inner pocket, she finds a handful of coins and a folded paper that might be a letter, though she doesn't feel right reading it while he can't give permission. These small possessions only deepen the mystery of who he is and how he came to be dying alone in her desert. 3 days pass before the stranger regains full consciousness. Clara has maintained a careful routine during his recovery, checking on him every few hours, dripping water and thin broth between his lips when he stirs, changing the dressing on his wounds. She's moved her sewing basket into his room, finding comfort in the quiet work while keeping watch over her patient. On the morning of the 4th day, she enters to find him awake, those startling blue eyes tracking her movement with clear intelligence. Clara pauses in the doorway, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. Hair pulled back in a simple bun, dress practical rather than pretty, her pregnancy evident in her silhouette. "Ma'am?" he says, his voice rough from disuse but carrying an unexpected gentleness. He tries to sit up and immediately grimaces, one hand going to his injured shoulder. "Easy now," Clara says, moving to his bedside. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needs time to heal." She helps him settle back against the pillows, noting the way he tries to minimize any assistance. A proud man, then, unaccustomed to depending on others. "Where am I?" He looks around the simple room, whitewashed walls, single window, basic furniture that speaks of function over comfort. "My way station, about 30 miles east of Tucson. I found you in the desert, half buried in sand." Clara studies his face. As she speaks, watching for recognition or explanation. "Do you remember how you got there?" He's quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Fragments," he admits finally. "I remember riding hard, being thirsty. There was shooting, I think, but it's all mixed up, like trying to remember a dream." Clara nods, having expected as much. Head injuries often affect memory, according to Samuel's medical books. "What's your name?" Another pause, longer this time. "Weston," he says slowly, as if testing the sound. "Weston Cade." The name seems to bring back some confidence, and he looks at her more directly. "I'm grateful for your help, ma'am. I know it wasn't easy, getting me here in your condition." Heat rises in Clara's cheeks at his reference to her pregnancy. "I couldn't leave you to die. Common decency doesn't require explanation." She busies herself straightening his blankets, avoiding his steady gaze. "Are you hungry? I have broth warming on the stove." Weston nods, and Clara notices he doesn't try to sit up on his own this time, accepting her help with better grace. As she feeds him small spoonfuls of the rich broth, she finds herself studying his hands, long-fingered and scarred, with calluses that speak of hard work. No wedding ring, she notes, then wonders why that detail matters to her. "You live here alone?" Weston asks between sips, his eyes taking in the careful way she moves around the room, the efficiency born of long practice. "I do now." Clara doesn't. Elaborate, and something in her tone discourages further questions. They eat in comfortable silence, and she's surprised to find his presence calming rather than threatening. Most men would have made her nervous, isolated as she is, but Weston carries himself with a restraint that puts her at ease. Over the following days, as Weston grows stronger, Clara begins to see glimpses of the man beneath the mystery. He insists on helping with small tasks despite her protests, moving carefully around the way station to avoid straining his healing injuries. She finds him one morning in the stable, speaking softly to Patience while examining her hooves with practiced hands. "You know horses," Clara observes, leaning against the stall door. "Some," Weston admits, not looking up from his work. "This one's got a stone bruise on her left front. Nothing serious, but it'll make her tender for a few days." He straightens, slowly, favoring his injured shoulder. "Fine animals, they trust you." There's something in his voice when he talks about trust that makes Clara think he doesn't give or receive it easily. She watches him work with the horses over the next few days, noting his gentle competence, the way the animals respond to his calm presence. Whatever his past contains, it included good treatment of creatures in his care. In the evenings, after the day's work is done, Clara finds herself sharing the front porch with Weston. He doesn't speak much, but his silence is companionable rather than brooding. Sometimes she brings her sewing basket outside, working on tiny garments while he whittles pieces of wood into useful objects. A new handle for her water bucket. Repairs. For a broken chair leg. It's during one of these quiet evenings that Clara first sings to her unborn child. The lullaby is one her mother sang to her, simple and sweet, and she doesn't realize Weston is listening until she notices his hands have stilled on his carving. When she stops, embarrassed, he looks up with something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "Don't stop on my account," he says quietly. "It's been a long time since I heard anything so peaceful." Clara resumes her singing, but she's acutely aware of Weston's attention now, the way his breathing seems to slow and deepen as her voice carries across the desert evening. When she finishes, the silence stretches between them, comfortable but charged with something unspoken. "Your husband was a fortunate man," Weston says finally. "Was," Clara confirms, her hand moving unconsciously to Samuel's ring. "The fever took him 8 months ago." She doesn't know why she's telling him this, why the words come so easily when she's barely spoken of Samuel's death to anyone. Weston nods, understanding more than sympathy in his expression. "I'm sorry for your loss, and sorry you're facing this alone." His gesture takes in her pregnancy, the way station, the vast emptiness around them. "I manage," Clara says, but there's less conviction in her voice than usual. Having Weston here has reminded her how heavy the silence can be, how the burden of constant vigilance weighs on her spirit. "You do more than manage," Weston says firmly. "You saved my life, and you're building something good here that takes strength most people don't have." His words warm her in ways she doesn't expect, and Clara finds herself looking forward to these evening conversations more than she should. There's a depth to Weston that intrigues her, hints of education and refinement beneath his rough exterior. He quotes poetry sometimes, unconsciously, and she catches him reading Samuel's books when he thinks she's not watching. But with the growing comfort comes growing questions. Weston's nightmares have returned as his strength improves. She hears him calling out in the night, words she can't quite understand, but that sound like apologies or warnings. He won't talk about his dreams, changing the subject whenever she asks if he's sleeping well, and there are his skills to consider. Clara has seen him handle her rifle when checking the grounds for threats, noting the easy familiarity with which he hefts the weapon. His movements speak of training, of experience with violence that goes beyond simple frontier survival. The scars on his body tell stories she's not sure she wants to know. One morning she finds a leather-bound book among his few possessions, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets, well-worn and obviously treasured. The discovery only deepens the puzzle of who Weston Cade really is, and what brought him, injured and alone, to her desert sanctuary. A week into Weston's recovery, Clara discovers him sitting on the edge of his bed before dawn, staring at a pair of broken spurs in his hands. The metal is tarnished, the leather straps cracked and worn, but he handles them with the reverence some men reserve for religious artifacts. "Couldn't sleep?" Clara asks softly from the doorway, wrapping her shawl tighter against the morning chill. Weston looks up, startled, then carefully sets the spurs aside. "Old habits. I've always been an early riser." He gestures to the spurs with a bitter smile. "Found these in my saddlebags. Can't even remember having saddlebags, but apparently I did." Clara enters the room and settles into the chair she's claimed during his recovery. They look well used. They are. Weston's voice carries a weight that has nothing to do with the physical objects. "I wore these for 15 years. Thought they made me somebody important." He picks up one spur, running his thumb along the rowel's blunted points. "Funny how a piece of metal can hold so much of what you used to be." "Used to be?" Clara prompts. Gently. She's learned that Weston will share pieces of himself if she doesn't push too hard. Weston is quiet for so long she thinks he won't answer. When he speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. "I was a lawman, Clara, sheriff of a town called Cedar Ridge, up north near the Colorado border. Good town, good people. They trusted me to keep them safe. Clara waits, sensing there's more he needs to say. There was a family, Weston continues, still staring at the spurs. The Hendersons. Tom was a blacksmith, had a wife named Sarah, and 2 little girls. Sweet children, always bringing me cookies when they came to town. His hands tighten on the metal. Raiders hit their homestead one night, while I was in the saloon drinking away my sorrows like a fool. By the time I got there, the house was burning and the family... He can't finish, but Clara understands. She's seen enough frontier violence to fill in the terrible details. It wasn't your fault, she says quietly. Weston's laugh is harsh and bitter. Wasn't it? I was the law in that town. I was supposed to protect them. Instead, I was drowning my guilt over past failures while innocent people died. He looks at Clara directly for the first time since beginning his story. The raiders were men I should have caught months earlier, men I let slip away because I was too broken to do my job properly. Clara feels the weight of his confession, understanding now why he carries himself like a man bearing invisible wounds. What happened after? I turned in my badge, told the town council I wasn't fit to wear it anymore. Some folks tried to talk me out of leaving, said one mistake didn't erase all the good I'd done. But they didn't understand. Weston sets the spurs on the small table beside his bed, his movements careful and deliberate. A sheriff who can't protect the people who trust him isn't a sheriff at all. He's just a man with a gun and too much pride. So you left. Clara thinks of her own flight from her old life, the way grief can make a person feel like a stranger in their own skin. I left, rode south with no particular destination in mind, just away from the memories and the guilt. Been drifting ever, since taking odd jobs, avoiding anywhere that might need a lawman. Weston rubs his injured shoulder absently. Can't even remember how I ended up in that desert. Reckon my horse threw me and ran off, but the why of it is just gone. Clara reaches out tentatively and touches his hand. The contact is brief but warm, and she feels him startle at the gentle contact. Sometimes running is the only way to survive, she says. I understand that. Weston looks at their joined hands, something vulnerable flickering across his features. You lost more than a husband, didn't you? Clara nods, surprised by his perception. I lost myself for a while. The woman I was before Samuel died. Before I learned what it meant to be truly alone. Some days I still miss her, that younger woman who thought love was enough to protect you from anything. Maybe it is, Weston says quietly. Maybe love is just harder to recognize when it comes wearing different clothes. They sit in comfortable silence as the sun rises, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Clara finds herself studying Weston's profile, noting the way morning light softens the harsh lines grief has carved around his eyes. There's gentleness in him despite the violence in his past, a tenderness that shows in how he speaks to her horses, how carefully he moves. Around her pregnancy. Over the following days, their conversations deepen. Weston shares fragments of his life before Cedar Ridge, growing up on a ranch in Texas, learning to read from his schoolteacher mother, joining the Rangers as a young man full of idealistic notions about justice. Clara tells him about her father's judicial work, her education at a ladies' academy, the books that shaped her understanding of the world. You're educated, Weston observes one evening as they discuss a passage from Samuel's copy of Emerson. More than most men I've known. My father believed daughters deserved the same intellectual opportunities as sons, Clara explains. He said ignorance was the greatest tragedy that could befall any mind, regardless of gender. Smart man. Samuel was fortunate to win you. Clara feels heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment, and something else, a flutter of awareness that has nothing to do with her pregnancy. She's begun to notice small things about Weston, the way his eyes crinkle when he's amused, how his voice softens when he speaks to her, the careful way he's begun to anticipate her needs without making her feel helpless. One afternoon, as Clara struggles to reach something on a high shelf, Weston appears beside her, his height making the task effortless. But instead of simply retrieving the item, he pauses, standing close enough that she can smell the clean scent of the soap he uses, feel the warmth of his body. "Clara," he says softly, and something in his voice makes her look up. For a moment, the air between them shimmers with possibility, with the recognition of attraction that has been building despite their circumstances. Then the baby kicks hard, a reminder of all the reasons this growing connection is complicated, and the moment passes. Weston steps back, handing her the jar she'd been reaching for, but his eyes hold hers a beat longer than necessary. "Thank you," Clara manages, her voice slightly breathless. "Anytime," Weston replies, and they both know he means more than helping with household tasks. That night, Clara lies awake, listening to the desert wind and thinking about the man sleeping in her guest quarters. She's drawn to him in ways that surprise and unsettle her, drawn to his gentleness and his pain in equal measure. But she's also terrified of what that attraction might mean for the carefully ordered life she's built around. Her solitude and her coming child, Weston, she senses, is fighting the same battle. She catches him watching her sometimes with an expression that mingles longing with regret, as if he's memorizing her face, while reminding himself why he can't act on his feelings. The broken spurs remain on his bedside table, a constant reminder of the man he used to be and the guilt that drives him. Clara finds herself wanting to take them away, to somehow ease the burden he carries, but she understands that some weights can only be lifted by the person carrying them. Still, in the growing warmth between them, she begins to hope that healing, for both of them, might be possible after all. The traveling merchant arrives on a Tuesday morning, his wagon creaking under the weight of supplies and news from the outside world. Clara watches from the kitchen window as the man, weathered and dusty like all who traverse the desert roads, pulls up to the way station with obvious relief at finding civilization. "Morning, ma'am," he calls, tipping his hat as Clara emerges. To greet him, "Name's Fletcher. Been traveling this route for 15 years, and I don't recall seeing you before." "Clara Bennett," she replies, conscious of Weston's absence. He's checking the back fence line, a task he's taken upon himself despite her protests that it's unnecessary. "My husband passed last year. I've been managing the station since then." Fletcher's eyes take in her pregnancy with the calculating gaze of a man accustomed to reading situations quickly. "That's a hard row to hoe for a woman alone. You got help coming for when your time arrives?" "I'll manage," Clara says, though the question touches on her deepest fear. "What news do you bring? It's been weeks since we've seen anyone." Fletcher begins unloading supplies she's ordered, flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, while regaling her with tales from the road. Most of it is harmless gossip about people Clara doesn't know, but one piece of information makes her blood run. A cold saw a bounty hunter in Tucson asking questions about a missing man, Fletcher says casually, hefting a sack of flour. Description he gave sounded like a fellow I might have seen riding this way a few weeks back. Tall man, dark hair, blue eyes, said he was wounded, might be traveling slow. Clara's hands still on the inventory list she's checking. A bounty hunter, name of Briggs, cold-eyed son of a gun if I ever saw one. Paying good money for information about this missing fellow. Claims the man's wanted for deserting his post, abandoning his duty when folks were counting on him. Fletcher pauses in his work, studying Clara's face. "You ain't seen nobody matching that description, have you?" "No." Clara lies smoothly, though. Her heart pounds against her ribs. "Like I said, you're the first visitor we've had in weeks." Fletcher nods, but his eyes are shrewd. He's been traveling long enough to recognize when someone isn't telling the complete truth. Still, he doesn't press the matter, finishing his delivery and accepting the payment Clara offers. "You take care of yourself, ma'am," he says, climbing back onto his wagon. "And if that mysterious fellow does show up, you might want to think twice about harboring him. Briggs didn't strike me as the sort to give up easy." Clara watches the merchant's wagon disappear into the heat shimmer of the desert, her mind racing. When she finally spots Weston returning from his fence inspection, she struggles to maintain a normal expression, but he reads her tension immediately. "What's wrong?" he asks, scanning the horizon as if looking for threats. Clara considers lying again, but realizes she can't protect him from the truth forever. "There was a merchant here. He brought news about a bounty hunter in Tucson looking for a man matching your description." Weston goes very still, his face draining of color. "What name did he give?" "Briggs. He said you were wanted for deserting your post." Clara watches Weston's reaction carefully, noting the way his jaw tightens and his hand unconsciously moves toward where his gun belt would hang if he wore one. "Briggs," Weston repeats, the name carrying the weight of old history. "He was my deputy in Cedar Ridge. I should have known he'd come looking. Is it true? Are you wanted by the law?" Weston shakes his head slowly. "Not in the way you might think. I resigned my position legally, turned in my badge, proper. But Briggs," he runs a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older. "He never forgave me for leaving, said I was abandoning my duty, running away when the town needed me most." Clara feels a complex mix of relief and new worry. "So you're not a criminal?" "No, but that won't matter to Briggs. He's always been rigid about duty and honor. In his mind, leaving Cedar Ridge was the same as desertion, and he's probably convinced himself he's doing the right thing by dragging me back." Weston looks toward the horizon where the merchant's wagon disappeared. "I should go, if he's asking. Questions in Tucson. It won't be long before someone remembers seeing me head this direction." "No." The word comes out sharper than Clara intended, surprising them both with its vehemence. "You're not well enough to travel, and I won't have you dying in the desert just to spare me inconvenience." "Clara, you don't understand. If Briggs finds me here, it puts you in danger. He's not a bad man, but he's single-minded when he thinks he's on the side of justice. He might see you as an accomplice if he thinks you've been hiding me. Let me worry about that." Clara squares her shoulders, and Weston sees the steel beneath her gentle exterior. "This is my home, and I decide who's welcome here. Besides, you said yourself he's not a criminal. What's the worst that could happen?" Weston's expression is grim. "You haven't met Briggs. He's the sort who sees everything in black and white, right and wrong, with no room for circumstances or human weakness. If he's tracked me this far, he won't give up until he's satisfied some notion of justice has been served." Despite her brave words, Clara feels fear creeping up her spine. She's built her new life around avoiding complications, maintaining the quiet routine that keeps her and her unborn child safe. Having a bounty hunter sniffing around the way station definitely qualifies as a complication. But looking at Weston, seeing the way guilt and resignation wore in his expression, Clara realizes something important. The man who helped her with daily tasks, who spoke gently to her horses, who listened to her sing lullabies with such longing in his eyes, that man deserves protection, deserves the chance to heal from wounds that go deeper than those on his body. "How long do you think we have?" she asks practically. Weston considers this. If Fletcher talked to Briggs, and if Briggs believes him, maybe a week. He'll want to be thorough, check every possible hiding place between Tucson and the eastern routes. Then we have a week to decide what to do. Clara's hand moves to her belly, where the baby seems to sense her tension and responds with restless movement. "Maybe he won't find us. This isn't exactly a well-traveled road." "Maybe," Weston agrees, but his tone suggests he doesn't believe it. "Clara, I want you to know, whatever happens, I'm grateful for what you've done. You saved my life and you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope that I might be worth saving." The simple honesty of his words hits Clara like a physical blow. She looks at this man who's somehow become essential to her daily happiness, who's filled the silence of her solitude with companionship she didn't know she craved, and realizes that losing him now would be almost unbearable. "You are worth saving," she says firmly, "and we'll figure out how to keep you safe." Weston's smile is sad but grateful. "You're a remarkable woman, Clara Bennett. Your husband knew how fortunate he was." As evening falls, they maintain their usual routine, but both are conscious of how that routine might soon be shattered. Clara finds herself memorizing small moments, the way Weston's hands move as he whittles, the sound of his quiet laughter, the comfort of having another heartbeat sharing her space under the vast desert sky. The wanted poster that Fletcher mentioned might as well be hanging on their wall, a constant reminder that the peaceful interlude they've created together is as fragile as desert flowers after rain. But for tonight at least, they still have each other and the hope that love might be stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. The storm builds on the horizon like God's own fury, towering clouds. The color of old bruises rolling across the desert sky. Clara has been watching it approach all afternoon, her body aching with the peculiar tension that comes before weather changes. The baby has been restless all day, kicking and shifting as if sensing something momentous approaching. That's going to be a big one, Weston observes, joining her on the porch as evening falls. The wind has picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the electric charge that makes horses nervous and sets teeth on edge. Desert storms can be violent, Clara agrees, one hand pressed to her lower back where a persistent ache has been building since morning. We should secure everything that might blow away. They work together as the wind intensifies, bringing in Clara's laundry from the line, checking that the stable doors are firmly latched, moving anything loose under cover. The physical activity helps Clara ignore the growing discomfort in her back and the strange cramping sensations that come and go like tidal waves. By full dark, the storm hits with the fury Clara expected. Rain pounds the adobe walls like bullets, and wind howls around the buildings with voices that sound almost human. Clara has seen desert storms before, but this one feels different, more personal, as if the very sky is reflecting the turmoil in her heart. She's in the kitchen, preparing a late supper when the first real contraction hits, doubling her over with pain so intense it drives the breath from her lungs. When it passes, leaving her gasping and shaken, Clara realizes with crystal clarity that her baby has chosen this night, this storm, to make its entrance into the world. "Weston," she calls, her voice barely audible over the wind. When he doesn't. "Respond," she calls louder, fighting panic as another contraction builds. "Weston." He appears in the kitchen doorway immediately, takes one look at her face, and crosses the room in 3 quick strides. "The baby?" Clara nods, unable to speak, as pain washes through her again. When it subsides, she manages, I think it's time." Weston's face goes pale, but his voice remains steady. "What do you need me to do?" Despite her fear, Clara feels a surge of gratitude for his calm response. "Help me to the bedroom. There are supplies prepared in the chest by the window. Clean. Sheets. Towels. String for the cord." She grips his arm as another contraction starts. "And there's a bottle of whiskey in the pantry, for cleaning and other purposes." The next hours pass in a blur of pain and desperate effort. Weston proves surprisingly capable, following Clara's instructions with steady hands despite his obvious nervousness. He helps her change into a clean nightgown, arranges the supplies. She's carefully prepared for this moment and builds up the fire to chase away the chill that seems to penetrate everything despite the closed shutters. "You've done this before," Clara gasps between contractions, noting his competence with medical procedures. "My sister," Weston explains briefly, wringing out a cloth in cool water to bathe her face, "helped deliver her youngest when the doctor—" "You couldn't make it through a blizzard. Some things you don't forget." The storm rages outside, while a different kind of storm consumes Clara's body. The contractions grow stronger and closer together, each one a wave of pain that threatens to drown her completely. But between them, in the brief respites, Weston talks to her. Quiet stories about his childhood, memories of his sister's children, anything to keep her focused on something beyond the overwhelming physical struggle. "Tell me about Samuel," he says during one particularly difficult stretch, when Clara feels like she might lose herself completely to the pain. "Samuel," Clara breathes, clinging to the sound of the name like an anchor. He was gentle, patient. He used to read to me in the evenings, poetry mostly. He loved Wordsworth. Another contraction builds, and she grips Weston's hand with desperate strength. He would have been a good father. He is a good father. Weston corrects gently. This child carries his love, and yours. That makes him the luckiest baby in the territory. Hours pass. Clara loses track of how many. The storm outside mirrors the intensity of her labor, wind and rain battering the way station while she battles to bring new life into the world. Weston never leaves her side, offering water when she can take it, supporting her when she needs to walk through the contractions, holding her hands when the pain threatens to overwhelm her completely. Finally, as dawn struggles to penetrate the storm clouds, Clara feels the overwhelming urge to push. "The baby's coming," she gasps, and Weston positions himself to help, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what they're attempting. The final stage of labor is both eternal and instant, endless pain, followed by sudden, blessed relief as the baby slips into the world. Weston catches the tiny, slippery form with gentle hands, his eyes wide with wonder as the child takes its first breath and lets out a strong, healthy cry. "It's a boy," Weston says, his voice thick with emotion as he carefully cleans the baby and wraps him in the soft blanket Clara prepared months ago. A perfect, beautiful boy. Clara weeps as Weston places her son in her arms, overwhelmed by love, so fierce it takes her breath away. The baby is tiny, but obviously healthy, with a thick shock of dark hair and eyes that seem to look right into her soul. After hours of pain and fear, holding him feels like a miracle. "Hello, little one," she whispers, touching his perfect fingers, marveling at the tiny nails, the way he grasps reflexively at her touch. "Welcome to the world." Weston completes the necessary tasks, cutting and tying the umbilical cord, helping Clara deliver the afterbirth, cleaning up the evidence of the night's struggle. But Clara notices the way he looks at the baby, the tenderness in his expression when he thinks she's not watching. This hard man, this former lawman carrying so much guilt and pain, melts completely at the sight of new life. "What will you name him?" Weston asks as Clara nurses the baby for the first time, marveling at how naturally the child takes to feeding. Clara has been thinking about this for months, but now, looking at the two most important people in her world, the answer comes easily. "Samuel Wesley," she says, "for his father and for the man who helped bring him safely into the world." Weston goes very still. "Clara, you don't have to." "I want to," she interrupts firmly. "You saved both our lives tonight. If you hadn't been here..." She doesn't finish the thought, can't bear to imagine what might have happened if she'd faced this alone. Outside, the storm is finally beginning to break, the wind dying down and the rain gentling to a steady patter. Inside the way station, a new family has been born, not in the traditional sense perhaps, but bound together by shared struggle and growing love. As Clara falls asleep with her son in her arms, she sees Weston settling into the chair beside her bed, clearly intending to stand watch through what remains of the night. The sight fills her with a contentment she hasn't felt since Samuel's death, a sense that perhaps happiness is possible again after all. Little Samuel Wesley Bennett sleeps peacefully between them, unaware that his birth has changed everything, that the man watching over them both has found a purpose worth living for, and that his mother has discovered love can indeed come twice in a lifetime, wearing different clothes, but no less real for the change. 5 days after little Samuel's birth, the dust cloud on the eastern horizon resolves into a single rider approaching at a steady pace. Clara, still weak from childbirth but mobile enough to move around the way station, spots him first from the kitchen window where she's preparing Weston's morning coffee. "Someone's coming," she calls softly, not wanting to wake the baby who sleeps peacefully in the wooden cradle Weston carved during the long hours of her recovery. Weston appears instantly, moving to the window with the fluid alertness that never quite leaves him, despite weeks of peaceful domesticity. His face hardens as he studies the approaching figure. "That's him," he says grimly. "That's Briggs." Clara feels her stomach clench with fear and something else. Fierce protectiveness for the man who delivered her son and the fragile happiness they've built together. "What do? We face it," Weston says, but his hand moves unconsciously toward where his gun belt should hang. "Whatever happens, Clara, I want you to know these past weeks have been the best of my life. You and the baby, this place, it's shown me what I've been running from." Before Clara can respond, the rider draws close enough for them to see him clearly. He's a tall man, lean and weathered, with the rigid posture of someone accustomed to authority. A badge glints on his vest, and his pale eyes scan the way station with professional thoroughness. "That's close enough," Weston calls from the porch, stepping into view with his hands visible but ready. "State your business." The rider, Briggs, pulls up his horse about 20 yards away, well within speaking distance but far enough to avoid any sudden moves. "Hello, Weston. Been looking for you for quite a while now. I figured you might be." Weston's voice is steady, resigned. "Come to drag me back to Cedar Ridge?" Something flickers across Briggs' weathered features. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. "That's what I thought when I started tracking you. But things have changed since you rode out." Weston frowns. "Changed how?" Briggs dismounts slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening, despite the tension crackling between them. "Mind if I water my horse? It's been a long ride, and I've got a story to tell that might interest you." Clara emerges from the way station, the baby cradled in her arms, and Briggs' attention shifts to her with obvious surprise. "Mom," he says, in touching his hat brim. "Didn't realize Weston had company." "This is Clara Bennett," Weston says, stepping slightly closer to her in an unconsciously protective gesture. "The way station is hers. Clara, this is Deputy Marshal Jake Briggs." "Deputy Marshal," Clara echoes, noting the federal badge she'd missed before. "I thought you were sheriff's deputies in Cedar Ridge." "Were," Briggs confirms, accepting the water. Bucket Weston provides for his horse. "But like I said, things have changed." He studies Weston carefully. "You look better than I expected. When you disappeared from that saloon in Tombstone, folks figured you were either dead or drinking yourself to death somewhere in the desert." "Tombstone?" Weston's confusion is evident. "I don't remember being in Tombstone." Briggs's expression sharpens with interest. "You don't remember? Hit your head pretty hard when that bronc threw you, according to the doc who patched you up. Said you might have some gaps in your memory for a while." Clara watches this exchange with growing bewilderment. Nothing Briggs is saying matches what Weston told her about his past, about leaving Cedar Ridge in disgrace after failing to protect the Henderson family. "Jake," Weston says slowly, "I remember leaving Cedar Ridge. I remember turning in my badge after the Henderson massacre. What I don't remember is anything after that until Clara found me half dead in the desert." Briggs goes very still, his pale eyes moving between Weston and Clara with sharp intelligence. "Weston, what massacre? What are you talking about?" The question hangs in the desert air like a physical thing. Clara feels her world tilting as she realizes something fundamental about Weston's story doesn't align with what this man, clearly someone who knows him well, is saying. "The Henderson family," Weston says, his voice tight with old pain. "Tom, Sarah, and their girls. Raiders hit their homestead while I was drinking in Murphy's saloon, burned the house, killed the whole family. I failed them, Jake. Failed to do the one thing a sheriff is supposed to do: protect innocent people." Briggs stares at him for a long moment, then shakes his head slowly. "Weston, the Henderson family is alive and well. Tom's expanded his smithy. Sarah just had another baby last month. The girls are growing like weeds and still bringing cookies to whoever's wearing the badge." Clara feels the world shift beneath her feet. She looks at Weston, seeing his face drain of all color as Briggs's words penetrate his consciousness. "That's impossible," Weston whispers. "I saw the burned house. You saw the old Jameson place," Briggs interrupts gently. "Burned out. 3 years before you ever came to Cedar Ridge. The Henderson homestead is 2 miles south of there, safe and sound." He reaches into his saddlebag and withdraws a folded paper. "I brought this, thinking you might need proof." With trembling hands, Weston unfolds the paper. It's a letter, written in a feminine hand, and as he reads, tears begin streaming down his face. Clara moves closer, close enough to see the signature. "Sarah Henderson and family. She wrote that when I told her I was coming to find you," Briggs explains. "The whole town's been worried sick since you disappeared. You're not wanted for anything, Weston. You're a hero to those people. The man who cleaned up Cedar Ridge, who made it safe for families to settle and prosper. But the guilt," Weston says, his voice breaking, "the weight of all those failures." "What failures?" Briggs asks. "You brought in more outlaws in 2 years than the previous sheriff managed in 10. You built trust between the law and the citizens. Hell, when you didn't come back from pursuing those horse thieves, half the town wanted to form a posse to look for you." Clara reaches out and takes the letter from Weston's shaking hands, scanning the neat script that speaks of gratitude, concern, and genuine affection for the man beside her. This isn't the correspondence of people angry at a failed lawman. It's the worried words of friends missing someone important to them. "The head injury," Briggs continues, his voice gentle with understanding. "Doc said it might scramble your memories some, mix up events, make you remember things that didn't happen the way you think they did." Looks like he was right. Weston sinks onto the porch steps as if his legs can no longer support him. "You mean I've been running from something that never happened, carrying guilt for a tragedy that existed only in my damaged mind?" "Seems that way," Briggs confirms. "The real question is, what do we do about it now?" Clara looks between the 2 men, her mind racing. This changes everything. Weston's exile, his guilt, the reasons he believes he can't have a normal life. But it also raises new questions about what brought the real threat to their doorstep. "Jake," she says carefully, "if Weston isn't wanted, if he's a respected lawman with a town waiting for his return, why did that merchant say he was asking about a deserter?" Briggs's expression darkens. "Because I wasn't the only one asking questions about Weston's whereabouts. There's a gang of outlaws who have very good reasons for wanting him found, but not for any legal purpose." He looks directly at Weston. "The Crenshaw brothers. Remember them?" Weston's face goes pale again, but this time with recognition rather than confusion. "The gang I was tracking when I got thrown from my horse. They're still out there. Still out there, and they know you survived that fall. They've been asking questions too, following your trail just like I have. Difference is they're not interested in bringing you home safe." Briggs checks his weapons with practiced efficiency. "They're about 2 days behind me, and they're not coming alone." Clara feels ice in her veins as the true scope of their danger becomes clear. Not a bounty hunter seeking a deserter, but a gang of criminals seeking revenge on the lawman who nearly captured them, and they're heading straight for her isolated way station, where she lies recovering from childbirth with a newborn baby. "How many?" Weston asks, and Clara hears the sheriff returning to his voice, calm, professional, ready to face whatever comes. 6, maybe 7. Hard men who've got nothing left to lose." Briggs meets Weston's eyes squarely. They know this is their best chance to settle the score before you remember who you really are and come after them again. Weston stands slowly, his hand moving instinctively to where his gun should hang. "Then I guess it's time to remember." In his saddlebag, Briggs has brought more than a letter. He withdraws a gun belt, well-worn leather, and a Colt 45 that fits Weston's hand like it was made for him. As he straps it on, Clara sees the transformation, watches the gentleman who delivered her baby become the lawman who made a frontier town safe for families. "Clara," Weston says, turning to her with eyes that hold both love and grim determination, "we need to get you and the baby somewhere safe." But Clara Mae Bennett, who survived widowhood and childbirth in the desert, who built a life from nothing but determination and courage, shakes her head firmly. "This is my home," she says, "and you're my family now. We face this together." The transformation in Weston is immediate and profound. As he adjusts the familiar weight of his gun belt, Clara watches years of false guilt fall away from his shoulders. Like a discarded coat, the man who emerges is still gentle, still caring, but there's a core of steel in him now that speaks of competence and hard-earned authority. "Tell me about their leader," Weston says to Briggs, his voice carrying the crisp efficiency of a lawman planning strategy. Ezra Crenshaw, 42 years old, wanted for armed robbery, murder and cattle rustling across 3 territories, smart, ruthless, and holds grudges like most men hold onto money. Briggs spreads a rough map on the porch table, marking positions with small stones. He's got 5 men with him, his brother Cole, and 4 others who've been running with them for years, all experienced killers. Clara sits in the rocking chair, nursing little Samuel while listening to the men plan. The normalcy of feeding, her baby contrasts sharply with the deadly, serious conversation happening around her, but she refuses to be excluded from decisions that will affect their survival. "What's our defensive position like?" Weston asks, studying the way station with a tactical eye Clara hasn't seen before. "Could be better, could be worse," Briggs replies honestly. "The buildings are solid adobe, good protection against small arms fire. We've got clear sight lines in most directions, but the stable creates a blind spot on the north side." Weston nods, walking the perimeter with the measured pace of someone cataloguing strengths and weaknesses. Clara watches him note the placement of windows, the angles of approach, the natural cover available to attackers. This is a different man than the one who helped her with daily chores. This is Sheriff Weston Cade, and she's seeing him in his element for the first time. "They'll probably come at dawn," Weston observes. "Standard outlaw tactics, catch us when we're least alert, use the low sun to their advantage." "Agreed. That gives us today to prepare." Briggs checks his rifle, a Winchester that shows the care of a man who depends on his weapons. Question is, do we try to hold them off here or do we run? "We don't run," Clara says firmly, causing both men to look at her. "I'm 5 days past childbirth. We have a newborn baby, and this is my home. We make our stand here." Weston approaches her chair, kneeling beside it so their eyes are level. "Clara, these aren't ordinary criminals. They're killers who have nothing left to lose. If something happened to you or the baby—" "Nothing will happen to us," Clara interrupts, reaching out to touch his face. "Because you won't let it, and neither will I." She shifts the baby to one arm and reaches under her chair, producing Samuel's rifle, cleaned, loaded and ready. "I may be recovering from childbirth, but I can still shoot, and I know every inch of this property." The sight of Clara holding both her nursing baby and a loaded rifle creates an image so incongruous, yet so perfectly frontier, that both men pause in amazement. Here is the heart of the American frontier woman, nurturing life with one hand while prepared to defend it with the other. "She's right," Briggs says finally. "Running with a newborn would be suicide. We make our stand here and make it count." The rest of the day passes in intense preparation. Weston and Briggs move through the way station like men preparing for siege, which in essence they are. They reinforce windows with furniture, create firing positions that offer protection while maintaining clear fields of view, and establish fallback positions if the outer defenses are breached. Clara contributes despite their protests, using her intimate knowledge of the property to suggest defensive improvements they might have missed. She shows them the root cellar beneath the kitchen, a natural bunker that could serve as a last refuge if everything else fails. Most importantly, she prepares supplies, ammunition, water, bandages, and food that can be eaten quickly without preparation. "You've thought about this before," Weston observes, as Clara efficiently organizes medical supplies. "A woman alone out here has to think about everything." Clara replies matter-of-factly, "I've been preparing for various emergencies since Samuel died. Indian raids, bandits, injured travelers. I may not have expected this exact situation, but I've tried to be ready for trouble. As evening approaches, Weston takes Clara aside while Briggs continues his preparations. They stand in the garden behind the main house, the baby sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, despite the tension surrounding them. "I need to tell you something," Weston says, his voice heavy with emotion. "About us, about what's been growing between us." Clara feels her heart clench. "You're going to leave when this is over. Now that you remember who you really are, you'll go back to Cedar Ridge and your old life." "No," Weston says firmly, taking her free hand in both of his. "Clara, what I remember changes nothing about how I feel. If anything, it makes me more certain." He pauses, struggling with words that carry the weight of his heart. I love you, and I love that baby like he was my own son. The question is whether you can love a man who comes with the dangers of a lawman's life." Clara's breath catches as the words she's hoped to hear finally come. "Weston, I've loved you since you first helped me with the horses. I've been terrified to admit it, because I thought you'd leave eventually, that a man with your past wouldn't want to settle down with a widow and her child." "Then you understand nothing about men," Weston says with a smile that transforms his weathered features. "You and Samuel Wesley are the best things that ever happened to me. If we survive tomorrow, if you'll have me, I want to marry you properly and raise that boy as my own." Clara's eyes fill with tears of joy and terror combined. "When we survive. Tomorrow," she corrects. "Not if, when." They seal their commitment with a kiss that tastes of hope and desperation, of love declared in the shadow of mortal danger. The baby stirs between them, and Weston gently touches the infant's cheek with one finger. "Whatever happens tomorrow, he'll never lack for protection," Weston promises. "I swear that to you on my life." As full darkness falls, the three adults take turns standing watch while the others rest. Clara tries to sleep, but finds herself listening. To every sound the desert makes, wind through the sage, the distant call of coyotes, the settling sounds of the buildings around them. Beside her, baby Samuel sleeps with the profound peace of innocence, unaware that his life hangs in the balance. During Weston's watch, Clara joins him on the porch, unable to stay in bed while he stands guard alone. Couldn't sleep either. He asks softly, making room for her beside him on the bench he's positioned to watch the eastern approach. "Too much to think about." Clara settles beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. "Weston promised me something. Anything. If things go badly tomorrow, if it looks like they're going to overrun us, you take the baby and run. Don't worry about me. Just get him to safety." Weston's jaw tightens. "I won't leave you." "You will, if that's what it takes to save him," Clara insists fiercely. "He's innocent in all this. He deserves a chance to grow up." "We all deserve that chance," Weston replies. "And we're going to get it. Briggs and I have faced worse odds and come through. Tomorrow won't be any different." But Clara hears the uncertainty beneath his confident words, the way a man tries to convince himself as much as others when facing overwhelming odds. 6 or 7 hardened killers against 2 lawmen and a woman barely recovered from childbirth. The mathematics are grim, no matter how you calculate them. "Tell me about Cedar Ridge," Clara says, needing distraction from her dark thoughts. "Tell me about the town that's waiting for you." Weston's voice softens as he describes the community he served. Good families building lives in the wilderness, children playing safely in streets he helped make secure, honest businesses flourishing under the protection of fair law enforcement. As he talks, Clara begins to understand the man she's fallen in love with, the sense of purpose that drives him, the responsibility he feels for those who depend on him. "They sound like good people," she says when he finishes. "They are. The kind of people worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary." Weston looks at her directly. "Like you and Samuel Wesley. Like the family we could build together if we're granted the chance. Dawn seems both forever away and terrifyingly close." Clara finds herself memorizing Weston's face in the starlight, storing up images against an uncertain future. Whatever tomorrow brings, she wants to remember this moment, the quiet before the storm, the man she loves beside her. Their son, sleeping safely in the house behind them. When Briggs relieves Weston for the final watch before dawn, Clara insists on staying awake too. She sits in the kitchen nursing the baby while watching through the window for the first signs of approaching danger. Samuel's rifle leans against the wall beside her, loaded and ready. The eastern sky begins to lighten almost imperceptibly, and Clara knows their time of preparation is ending. Soon they'll discover whether love and determination are enough to triumph over hatred and greed, whether their makeshift family will survive to see another sunset. In her arms, baby Samuel sleeps peacefully, trusting completely in the protection of the adults around him. Clara vows silently that his trust will not be misplaced, that whatever the cost, her son will live to grow up in a world where good people can build honest lives without fear. The first grey light of dawn creeps across the desert, and with it comes the sound every defender dreads, the distant thunder of approaching hoofbeats growing steadily closer. The attack comes with the first full light of dawn, exactly as Weston predicted. 7 riders emerge from the morning haze like vengeful spirits, their horses' hooves thundering against the hard-packed earth as they spread into an attack formation designed to surround the way station. "Here they come!" Briggs calls from his position at the front window, his Winchester already tracking the lead rider. Ezra's in the center, just like always, letting his men take the risks while he directs the show. Clara crouches behind the reinforced kitchen window, Samuel's rifle steady in her hands despite the racing of her heart. Baby Samuel lies in his cradle in the root cellar below, as safe as they can make him in circumstances that offer no real safety. Every instinct screams at her to be with her child, but she knows the best protection she can give him is to help hold the defensive line above. "Remember," Weston calls from his position covering the stable approach, "don't waste shots. Make every bullet count. We're outnumbered, so we can't afford to miss." The first volley of gunfire erupts from the attacking riders, bullets smacking into the adobe walls with sharp cracks and puffs of dust. Clara flinches at the sound but keeps her rifle trained on the horseman approaching her section of the perimeter. The man is bearded and wild-looking, with the desperate eyes of someone who's chosen violence as his only solution to life's problems. "Easy, Clara." Weston's voice carries across the room, calm and reassuring despite their desperate circumstances. "Wait for a clear shot. Don't let them rush you into making mistakes." The riders circle the way station like wolves around wounded prey, firing rapidly but without much accuracy from horseback. Their strategy becomes clear. Pin the defenders down with continuous fire while 1 or 2 men dismount and attempt to breach the buildings on foot. Clara sees her chance when her target's horse shies at the sound of gunfire, causing the rider to struggle for control. In that moment of distraction, she squeezes the trigger, feeling the rifle's familiar kick against her shoulder. The man jerks in his saddle, clutching his left arm, but stays mounted and continues his attack. "Good shot," Briggs calls out. "Wounded but not down. Keep the pressure on him." The battle quickly becomes a deadly game of cat and mouse. The outlaws have superior numbers and mobility, but the defenders have cover and defensive positions. Bullets fly in both directions, the sharp reports echoing across the desert as both sides seek advantage. From her position, Clara can see pieces of Weston's wedding dress fabric that she'd torn into strips for bandages scattered around the room, ready for the wounds that seem inevitable. The sight reminds her of everything she stands to lose, not just her life, but the future she and Weston have planned together. 2 riders break off from the main attack, dismounting behind the stable where Weston can't get a clear shot. Clara shifts her position, trying to get an angle on them through the side window, when she hears the sound that chills her blood. Splintering wood as the men attempt to break through the stable door. "They're trying to flank us through the stable," she calls to Weston. "I see them," he replies, but his voice is strained. Clara realizes he's been hit, not seriously, based on his continued movement and shooting, but enough to slow him down. Briggs appears at her side, having moved from his forward position. "Can you hold this window alone for a minute? I need to help Weston with those flankers." Clara nods, taking over Briggs' field of fire, as well as her own. The responsibility feels enormous. She's now covering nearly half the way station's perimeter, by herself, with a baby depending on her accuracy and courage. The outlaw she wounded earlier has dismounted and is using his horse as cover while he works his way closer to the building. Clara can see only fragments of him as he moves, but she keeps her rifle trained on the spaces between his mount's legs, waiting for him to expose enough of himself for a killing shot. The sound of breaking wood grows louder from the stable, and Clara realizes the flanking attack is succeeding. Soon they'll have armed men inside the perimeter, and the carefully planned defense will collapse into close-quarters chaos that heavily favors the attackers. "Weston," she calls, "how much longer can you hold the stable?" "Not long," comes his reply, followed by rapid gunfire. They're almost through. Clara makes a decision that would have terrified her weeks ago but feels natural now. She tears a long strip from her skirt, part of the wedding dress fabric that has become their symbol of transformation, and quickly binds it around her wounded arm where a bullet grazed her. The makeshift bandage will have to do. "I'm moving." "To help," she calls to the men, leaving her window position despite the continued fire from outside. "Clara, no!" Weston starts to protest, but she's already moving, using the covered walkway to reach the stable entrance, where the sound of splintering wood grows more urgent by the second. As she rounds the corner, Clara comes face to face with a bearded outlaw who's just broken through the door. For a moment, they stare at each other in mutual surprise, the hardened criminal and the pioneer woman with a baby just days old. Then training and desperation take over simultaneously. The outlaw swings his pistol toward Clara just as she brings up Samuel's rifle. The two weapons fire almost simultaneously, the reports so close together they sound like a single, thunderous explosion. Clara feels the bullet pass so close to her head that it parts her hair, while her own shot takes the outlaw center mass, dropping him instantly. But there's no time to process what she's just done. A second man is already pushing through the broken door behind his fallen comrade. The second outlaw, through the door, moves with the deadly efficiency of a man accustomed to violence, but Clara's desperate situation has awakened something primal in her, the fierce protectiveness of a mother defending her young. She works the rifle's lever action with practiced speed, chambering another round as the man brings his gun to bear. Before either can fire, Weston appears behind the outlaw like an avenging angel, his Colt pressed against the man's skull. "Drop it," he commands, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a lawman who's faced down countless desperate men. The outlaw's hands shake as he weighs his options, but the cold steel against his head makes the choice for him. His pistol hits the ground with a metallic clatter that seems unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Good thinking, moving to help," Weston tells Clara, though she can see the worry in his eyes as he takes in her makeshift bandage and the pallor that speaks of adrenaline and blood loss. "But next time, call out so I know you're coming." "Next time." Clara manages a shaky laugh as she keeps her rifle trained on their prisoner. "I'm hoping there won't be a next time." Their moment of respite ends abruptly as gunfire erupts from the front of the way station. Briggs' voice carries over the din. They're making a push, all of them, straight at the front door. Weston quickly secures their prisoner with rope from the stable, then checks his weapons with the fluid movements of long practice. From his shirt pocket, he withdraws a tarnished badge, the sheriff's star he thought he'd lost forever. As he pins it to his vest, Clara sees the final transformation complete itself. This is Sheriff Weston Cade, and he's done running from who he's meant to be. "Stay here and watch our backs," he tells Clara. "If any more try to come through the stable, you know what to do." Clara nods, surprised by how natural it feels to be trusted with such deadly responsibility. A month ago, she was a pregnant widow struggling to survive alone. Now she's a woman who's killed to protect her family and feels no shame about it. The battle reaches its crescendo at the front of the way station. Through the broken stable door, Clara can hear the thunderous exchange of gunfire, the shouts of men fighting for their lives, the splintering of wood as bullets find their marks. Baby Samuel's cries drift up from the root cellar, and Clara's heart breaks, knowing her son is calling for her while she stands guard above. Then comes a sound that freezes her blood, Briggs crying out in pain, followed by the crash of something heavy hitting the floor. The deputy marshal who tracked Weston across the territory, who brought news that changed everything, has been hit. "Jake's down!" Weston shouts, and Clara can hear the controlled desperation in his voice. "Clara, I need you up here now!" Clara secures the stable entrance as best she can and races toward the front of the way station, her rifle ready. She finds Briggs propped against the wall, conscious but bleeding heavily from a shoulder wound, while Weston tries to cover multiple windows simultaneously. "How many left?" Clara asks, taking position at Briggs's abandoned window. "3, maybe." "4," Weston replies through gritted teeth. "Including Ezra, they're getting desperate, making stupid moves." As if to prove his point, one of the remaining outlaws breaks cover and makes a mad dash for the front door, firing wildly as he runs. Clara and Weston fire simultaneously, their bullets catching the man mid-stride and dropping him in the dust. 2 left, Briggs gasps from his position against the wall. Ezra and his brother Cole, they're holed up behind the water trough, but they can't stay there forever. The final confrontation comes with startling suddenness. Ezra Crenshaw steps into view, using his wounded brother as a human shield while he advances on the way station. His voice carries clearly across the morning air. "Cade, I know you're in there. Come out and face me like a man, or I start putting bullets in innocent folks." Clara's blood runs cold as she realizes what he means. If there are any other travelers on the road, any innocents within range, Ezra will use them to force Weston into the open. "Maybe," Clara replies, "but you can't take that chance. Not with who you are." Weston looks at her for a long moment, understanding passing between them. She sees the decision form in his eyes, the acceptance of duty that will send him into mortal danger because it's the right thing to do. "Cover me," he says simply, checking his weapons one final time. "Weston, no," Clara starts, but he's already moving toward the door. "If I don't come back," he says, pausing with his hand on the latch, "tell Samuel Wesley his father was a man who tried to do right. Both his fathers." Before Clara can respond, Weston steps through the door and into the deadly morning sunlight, his sheriff's badge catching the light like a beacon. In his hand, the Colt that marks him as a lawman ready to face whatever comes in service of justice and the protection of innocence. Clara raises her rifle, sighting down the barrel at Ezra Crenshaw, knowing that the next few seconds will determine whether her son grows up with a father or as an orphan. Her finger finds the trigger, steady despite everything, ready to do whatever it takes to bring the man she loves home alive. The final confrontation between law and lawlessness is about to begin. The desert morning holds its breath as Weston steps into the open, his boots crunching softly on the sand-covered ground. 50 yards away, Ezra Crenshaw waits behind the overturned water trough, his wounded brother Cole slumped against him, more liability than protection now. "That's far enough, Cade," Ezra calls out, his voice carrying the edge of a man with nothing left to lose. "Been looking forward to this conversation for a long time." "Then let's have it," Weston replies, his hand resting easy near his holstered Colt. The badge on his chest catches the morning light, a symbol of everything he'd forgotten, and everything he's reclaimed. "But first, let your brother go. This is between you and me." Ezra laughs, a sound like breaking glass. "Noble to the end, aren't you, Sheriff? Always thinking about other folks before yourself. That's what makes you weak." From her position at the window, Clara keeps her rifle trained on Ezra, waiting for the moment when Weston's life might depend on her accuracy. Beside her, Briggs struggles to maintain consciousness, his hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. "Maybe," Weston agrees calmly, "but it's also what makes the difference between a lawman and an outlaw. You see weakness where I see strength." "Pretty words," Ezra sneers. "Let's see how pretty they sound when you're bleeding out in the dirt." The moment stretches taut as a bowstring. Clara can see the tension in Weston's shoulders, the way his breathing has slowed and steadied. This is a man who's faced down killers before, who knows the deadly mathematics of gunfights and survival. When the action comes, it's blindingly fast. Ezra shoves his wounded brother aside and goes for his gun, but his desperation makes him sloppy. Weston's draw is smooth as silk, practiced through years of keeping the peace in dangerous places. The Colt clears leather and fires in one fluid motion, the bullet taking Ezra center mass and spinning him to the ground. Clara's rifle cracks almost simultaneously, her shot meant to cover Weston if Ezra's bullet flew true. But there's no need. The outlaw leader lies motionless in the dust, his reign of terror ended by the very lawman he'd hunted across the territory. Cole Crenshaw, wounded and broken, raises his hands in surrender. "Don't shoot," he calls weakly. "I'm done. We're all done." Weston keeps his gun trained on the surviving outlaw as he approaches, but Clara can see the fight has gone out of the man. Sometimes violence ends not with a bang, but with exhaustion, when the cost of continuing becomes too high to bear. 3 months later, the way station has transformed into something approaching a proper inn. Travelers are returning to the road as word spreads that it's safe again, that the notorious Crenshaw gang has been eliminated. Clara moves through the expanded dining room, her figure returned to its pre-pregnancy slenderness, carrying baby. Samuel on her hip as she serves breakfast to a family heading west to California. "More coffee, Sheriff?" she asks Weston, who sits at their customary table going through correspondence from Cedar Ridge. The town council has been patient, but they want their sheriff back, and decisions can't be postponed much longer. "Thank you, Mrs. Cade," Weston replies with a smile that never fails to warm Clara's heart. They'd married 6 weeks after the gunfight, with Briggs serving as witness, despite his still healing shoulder. The ceremony was simple, conducted by a traveling preacher, but the joy was profound. Clara settles beside her husband, letting baby Samuel, who's grown noticeably in the months since his dramatic birth, play with the silver star pinned to Weston's vest. The badge is polished now, no longer tarnished by doubt and false guilt. "The Hendersons wrote again," Weston says, showing Clara the latest letter. "Sarah says the whole town is planning a celebration for when we return. Apparently they're calling it Sheriff Weston Days." "That's sweet," Clara replies, though Weston hears the hesitation in her voice. "Have you decided what to tell them?" This is the question that's been hanging between them for weeks. Cedar Ridge wants their sheriff back, and Weston has responsibilities there that can't be ignored indefinitely. But Clara has built something important at the way station, and leaving would mean abandoning not just her home, but her independence. "I've been thinking," Weston says carefully, "about what it means to serve justice. I used to think it meant wearing a badge in one particular town, following a set of rules someone else made." Clara waits, recognizing the tone of a man working through a complex problem. But maybe justice is bigger than that. Maybe it's about making safe places where good people can build lives without fear. And maybe that can happen here just as well as in Cedar Ridge. Clara's heart leaps, but she keeps her voice steady. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the territory needs a sheriff for this district too. Someone to patrol the roads, keep the way station safe, make sure families like that one," he gestures, "to the California-bound travelers can make their journeys without fear." "And you think you're the man for that job?" Weston's smile is gentle but certain. "I think we're the team for that job. Partners in law enforcement as well as marriage." Clara looks around their expanded way station, at the guest rooms that are often full now, at the dining area where travelers share stories and plans, at the stable where horses rest safely for the night. This place has become what Samuel dreamed it might be, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness, a place where the frontier becomes home. "Deputy Sheriff Clara Cade," she says, testing the sound. "I like how that sounds." "So do I," Weston agrees, leaning over to kiss her as baby Samuel babbles happily between them. Outside, the desert stretches endlessly under the Arizona sun, vast and beautiful and no longer quite so lonely. The way station stands as proof that love can take root in the most unlikely places, that broken people can heal when they find each other, and that sometimes the greatest journeys end exactly where they're supposed to begin. As evening falls, Clara and Weston sit on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel Wesley sleeps peacefully in his father's arms, for Weston is his father in every way that matters, while his parents plan for a future they'll build together. The silver rings on their fingers catch the last light of day. Simple bands, crafted by a traveling silversmith from metal found in the nearby hills. Like their love, forged in the desert heat and tested by fire, but emerging stronger for the experience. In the distance, a coyote calls to its mate, and another answers. The desert is full of such partnerships, creatures that survive by finding each other in the vastness. Clara and Weston have done the same, two wounded souls who discovered that healing doesn't require forgetting the past, only learning to build something better from its lessons. The way station will continue to serve travelers, offering rest and safety to those brave enough to cross the frontier. But more than that, it stands as testament to the truth that Clara learned in the deepest desert and the hardest times. Sometimes the thing you're not looking for turns out to be exactly what you need.